Okay, welcome to political science, introduction to political science. Scholars, this course is a little bit, well, it's a lot different than American government. We're going to talk about politics, not just in the United States, but around the world. We're going to go a little deeper into what it is and the, what is the meaning of politics. And so in chapter one, we're doing an introduction to politics and the nature of politics and political analysis. I know this is now that you're in a higher level political science course, it can be a bit dry. So I'm gonna do the best I can to make this a little bit fun for you guys, kind of go over some key terms, and then we'll go from there, okay? One thing as I prepare to share the screen, one thing we need to understand is that politics is in every aspect of your life. You know, you guys are dealing with politics, okay? And so as 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 political people, we are political people by nature. You know, go to your family's Thanksgiving, and you'll see how we tend to navigate through the family drama. You know, anytime a family gets together, there's always going to be some drama. But anyway, so we're going to talk about politics, what it is, what it means to you. We're going to look at how it affects you in your everyday life. We're going to start off with a few definitions. One of the definitions is narrow. It's narrow when we talk about politics. What is politics? Politics is in a narrow viewpoint. We look at politics like with Parliament, which is in our system, we call it Congress. It's activity where people get together, but it's not just in Parliament or in Congress or in your school board, because right now a lot of people are getting involved in school boards, but it's more than that. So, but from a narrow viewpoint, we're looking at it as a way to have a lot of activities where people are gathering together, where people make decisions, but also people get together for where it's not governmental, it's not a legitimate organization, but sometimes people just get together to protest, like have demonstrations. It might be police brutality, it might be the 2020 election. Some of those type of things are not legitimate in the sense that it's being sanctioned by those legitimate organizations that oversee the conduct and the activities of our everyday society. Okay, so a wide definition is a way to settle differences between individuals and groups. When we look at the problem with wide definition, it can expand to include all human activities, thus it can become meaningless. When we look at society, when we look at problems, sometimes we will view it as a way of, we'll say, oh, if everybody's doing this one thing, where's the meaning behind it, right? So when sometimes things can become meaningless, and when it comes to politics, nothing should be meaningless, right? Sometimes we look at politics, when we see things as meaningless, we look at it as a failure. Like, okay, if there's no meaning behind it, then it must not be good for all of us or good for society. When we're talking about politics, sometimes when we look at politics, we're looking at violence. Violence is part of the subject matter of politics? Some writers believe that violence only starts when politics fails. No, it depends on what we view as violent, right? On this view, politics is about peaceful resolution of the dispute. So sometimes people say violence only comes when politics fails. So therefore, if politics is failing, then that means violence should come. Well, that's not always true. Others assert that violence or the threat of violence is an integral part of politics. Okay, when we look at trying to resolve issues, sometimes that threat of violence, right? It could happen. It seems the best side of the second view to regard the first as a reflection of the one form of politics. So example is idolized interpretation of liberal democracies. When we look at liberal democracies, we tend to see it as a group of people. The United States is and when we say liberal democracy, we're not talking about Democrats and Republicans. That's not what we're talking about. And the United States is a liberal democracy, okay? Yes, we're a republic, and I know somebody's gonna say, but I thought we were a republic. We're both. We get our democracy from the ancient Greek, and we get our republic from ancient Rome. So we're a hodgepodge of both. So when you say a liberal democracy, really you're saying it's a republic, because. So let me explain to you. In our form of system, in our system, our democracy, we vote for people to be president or governor or senator or mayor or board of supervisor, right, for your counties. We vote for that. So those people represent us. That's where the republic comes in. We vote for people to represent us. That's why we're a republic. But we are a democracy also, because we get to vote. That's it. We get to vote. When we talk about one form, there's many forms. For an example, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has united the West. So the West has come together. Prior to that, if we're looking at our political system, NATO was still NATO, but they weren't doing much, right? But when Russia invaded Ukraine, it really did force Germany, France, the UK, the United States to come together, but not just them, Poland, countries that are part of NATO that, we don't really talk about. The Baltic states, they all came together and decided to, just tell Russia we're siding with Ukraine, because Ukraine is a sovereign nation. And we believe in sovereignty. We believe people have the right to self-determination. And they do that through elections, okay? And so just be aware that there's always gonna be violence. We know that violence is part of the world we live in. And so as people who are learning about politics, and the politics I'm talking about is on a more mass, global, more macro, more legitimized, and I say legitimize in the sense that we have people who are elected who go to Congress and they make decisions. They're legitimate, okay? And so the current president of the United States has decided to work with Ukraine. Now, there's some people in our society on certain news networks that tend to side with Ukraine, but they are not legitimate, and we did not vote for them. Now, there's people who will watch a news network and say, well, they said this on there. That's fine, but the stance of the United States of America is we're siding with Ukraine against the Russian invasion, okay? This is a saying that you can't say, I don't do politics, because being silent is a political statement. This is by Tariq Ramadan. The thing is, and this is what thing we have to understand, when people say, I don't like politics, I'm not a political person, yeah, you are. We all are. We're political people. Again, go back to Thanksgiving. You navigating through the drama of family. You're making a statement politically to your family, to yourself, to everybody in the room. When you engage with certain people, you navigate. You sit at the dinner table with certain people. That's a political statement. You're at work. You choose to get along with your boss. Some people don't like the boss because sometimes our bosses are not the nicest people, but you choose no matter what, I'm still going to get along with this person because you're making a political statement. I want to do well at my job. I want to get benefits and bonuses. I want the good hours. Well, if I get along with this person, even though this person might not be the nicest person, don't know how to treat the employees very well, I will still benefit from playing the game. And that's literally what politics is. And everybody plays the game. If some people do it better than others, politically speaking, some people do it better than others, but we all try to play the game so we can kind of get through life and do well and survive, okay? Next, we're gonna go defining politics. So how do we define politics, right? There's really no single definition that is gonna be satisfy everybody. That's the thing about politics itself, is you're not gonna always know or understand what politics is. Okay, and so sometimes we will some people have a different definition of what politics is. If you say what is politics, they'll say politics is when people get together in Congress and they make decisions for the rest of us. Well, that is a definition, but political social American social scientist Harold Laswell in 1936, he said politics is about who gets what, when, and how. And that is kind of a good way to look at it. Who's going to get the resources? And let me tell you something, government is not going to give you everything you want. That's just not going to happen. That's why you have to have a backup plan and a do. So when government gives you something, and everybody is not going to always get the same thing. Sometimes some of us don't need certain things, right? Sometimes some of us need things like the social safety nets programs like EBT or Medi-Cal or something like that in order to survive. There's nothing wrong with taking any of that stuff. In fact, you should if you're in need of it. Everybody doesn't always get it, right? And this is why you'll hear some people will say, and when they'll say, I'm paying for all these people. Well, really, you're not. When you're paying taxes, you're not paying for anybody else but yourself and maybe your kids and a spouse, maybe. But you're not paying for the family next door, even though they might be on some social safety net plan type of program through the county, through the state, through whatever. The reality is you're not, my taxes don't go, I'm not paying for you, okay? I don't get any benefits from the social safety net programs because I don't need to. I do pretty well for myself. So me paying taxes, what I'm doing, and I usually, this is my analogy, is you are living in a house, right? And we're all Americans, we all live in this house, right? And so living in this house, I get a room in the house. And so the government's saying, okay, you can rent a room in my house, but you have to pay for your room. And now I might pay a little more than the person in the room next door. Doesn't mean I'm paying for them. Look, I'm paying a little more because maybe I'm making a little more. I don't know, but I don't pay for the people next door. I just pay for myself. And so when as a citizen of the United States, as a immigrant, legal immigrant here, where you're able to work here, you're not paying for anybody else. You're paying for yourself. And some people pay more than others, but it's none of your business. And so when we're talking about who gets what, when, and how, a lot of times with government, some people need more help from the government than others. A lot of times they're corporations who need more help from the government than others, to the tune of billions, because they don't pay, a lot of them don't pay their fair share of taxes. Anyway, this captures the key point that politics is about distribution of goods of various kinds. Politics is about distribution of goods. Like what you're saying, Professor, what type of goods are we talking about? Well, one good that we all need is the roadway. That's a distribution of good. We have to keep the roads clear, working well and functioning. Why? Well, because when the roads don't work well, our cars end up banged up. The alignment on it, the balance on it, the tires are destroyed, and then we have to pay for that. And so when government keeps the roadways, keeps the freeways, keeps the 101 or the 5 or the 10 or the 210 or the 15, the clear and able and not potholes on them, it's a distribution of goods. Making sure trucks are able to get to grocery stores so we can go into them and buy food. That's government. Our ports, Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach, again, distribution of goods. The government runs our ports, and making sure the goods are coming in and also going out. Okay, so that's one of the ways to define politics. Is politics inevitable? Some philosopher like Karl Marx had very negative views of politics. Karl Marx saw politics as a negative because you have the bourgeoisie class versus the proletariat, right? The bourgeoisie were the people who were the owners and the aristocracy. The proletariat were the workers. We're considered proletariat. I'm a proletariat. I come to this school, may it be Ventura College, Chaffey College, or Crafton Hills College, or Cerritos College, and I give of my time and I do my job. Now, I have to keep my politics out of it. Like when I teach in my classes, I don't, I try to keep my personal politics out. I will challenge you. So sometimes we'll get into debates and you'll say, well, I think he's a conservative because I've taken a conservative vantage viewpoint. Or somebody will say, I think he's a liberal because I'm taking a liberal stance. Well, what I'm doing is if I see that you're conservative, I'm going to argue the liberal viewpoint. If I see you're liberal, I'm going to argue the conservative viewpoint. And so you're saying to me, why are you doing that? I'm helping you to be a critical thinker, because the only way you can, if you can, it's easy to argue for something you believe in. It's, if you don't know how to argue the other side, you're probably going to, a lot of times you're going to lose an argument. So you need to know how the other side thinks and argues. Anyway, I don't think, especially when it comes to politics, there's ever really a perfect solution. There's never going to be a perfect solution to anything in politics. Some commentators like Francis Fukuyama have argued that ideological conflict is coming to an end. So he believes that we're going to all just, that there's going to be some kind of great war, or so at some point all this will come to an end, and probably it probably won't end very well for all of us. But however, differences of opinion about proper distribution of goods will always arise within and between nations. So thus politics in our sense seems inevitable. We're going to always have politics. Again, on a macro level, if we're talking about nation to nation, nation state to nation state, or on a micro level, if we're talking about such things as you and your, like I said, again, family dynamics is a political thing. Okay, I want to ask you a couple of political questions, and just take a moment to like really think about this, because this will be a part of an assignment that you'll have. And so these questions will be a part of the assignment. So one question is, what is justice? And you don't have to answer it now, because you're going to have an assignment that you're going to write it out for me and tell me what justice is to you. What is liberty? And when you do the assignment, understand what is liberty. That you will be, the assignment will be based on, you have to back up your statement with some kind of reference. So you have to find it somewhere. It'll be MLA format. You have to reference somebody and what they believe justice is, and tell me why you believe it, what they believe. Or what liberty is. Is liberty more important than economic equality? So that's something that's another question. So again, part of homework coming up, this is what your homework is. These are some questions that you'll be asking. You'll be answering. Who should make the key decisions? Who in our society should make key decisions? Who do you think? Should we have, and this is a question I want you to think about, should we have a society that is direct democracy, which is a little different than indirect? You know, we're indirect democracy, where we vote, again, republic comes into play, where we vote for people to go to Congress and make decisions for us. Or should we vote on every issue that comes before society? Should all of society be able to vote? And just know this, think about that. Every time an issue arises, we as a society have to vote on it. And so just think on that, okay? And then the last question will be, if political power should rest with population, how often should elections be held? What system should be used? Okay, you know, when we say systems are things like, should we be able to use our phones to vote? And remember, if you say, yes, we should, what if somebody hacks into your phone and votes for you? You got to take all this stuff into consideration. It's easy to say we should be able to do it from our phones, but you also have to take into account, what if somebody hacks your phone at an election time and you choose to vote for candidate A, and somehow every time you pick A, it goes to B no matter what, because somebody hacked the phone. It's very important that when we think on these things, especially at this level, because now you're not in intro to political, you're not intro to American government, you're at a level higher. So now you're at intro to political science, where we're going to talk about more, we're going to be more critical. We're going to look at things and criticize it, and critical in the sense of not to belittle or to make, but just to try to see another viewpoint. And I think that's very important. That again, it goes to arguing all sides of an argument and just trying to understand another viewpoint. What is the state? Okay, when we talk about the state, Max Weber, he has a classic definition. The state enjoys a monopoly on the legitimate use of physical force in enforcing its order within a given territory. So now think about that. The state enjoys a monopoly. So that means they have a monopoly on, and it's legitimate. Okay, legitimate means we all vote for it, we all respect it. It's like when the policeman pulls you over and says, give me your license and your registration. Now, you will say, what did I do wrong? But at the same time, you're going to give them your license and registration. And especially if you know you were speeding, right? So when you hand it over to them, why do we do this to the sheriff or the highway patrolman or the city or the municipal police officer? We do it because they're legitimate. They do have the right to physical force within a certain parameter. They just can't beat up people. And I know somebody's gonna say, well, we see it all the time. Yeah, but let's be clear, and I'm not trying to dismiss police brutality, because I know police brutality is real, but police by and large are not beating up people. It's not like 90% of the police force is abusive and abuse their power, right? It's because now we have these things we call cell phones. And cell phones, we can record a lot of stuff. We see a lot of things. You record your professors, in class when, and sometimes when we say things and you put it up on TikTok or you put it up on Twitter and, and then sometimes people have to lose their jobs. But when we talk about legitimate, and legitimate is, I'm the legitimate professor in this course. You're going to listen to me because why? Because you're the professor. No, and I can easily push back and say, how do you know I'm the professor? Well, because you're on this video. But then again, I could have kidnapped the real professor, right? Took over his life. And then now I'm doing all these things. Now it's pretty elaborate, we know it's not true, but it can happen if you're on The Young and the Restless or Days of Our Lives. Just joking. That's my little bad joke for this course. Anyway, the state can be distinguished from civil society, the range of private institutions existing between the individual and the state, such as businesses, trade unions, religious groups, charities. Now, let's be clear. Yes, private institutions exist, but also within the state, private institutions also have to conduct themselves and behave within the structure of the state. But they are separate, especially in the United States. Look, in the United States, unions, religion, because we believe in the idea of separation of church and state. That's what we say here in America. Now, can a person be a religious person and be a part of the state? They sure can. I would argue every president that's been president has claimed to be a Christian. So of some form, may it be Catholic, Protestant, Methodist, some form of Protestant, Methodist, Baptist, doesn't matter. Every president has claimed to be a person of faith in some form or another. And let me push back. So before somebody says, well, I don't think that person, doesn't matter what you think. If they claim to be something, you can't tell them they're not. So if you're a Trump supporter, say, well, Obama never claimed to be a Christian, he's a Muslim. Well, it doesn't matter. He has claimed to be a Christian. If you're an anti-Trumper, and that's, I'm just using terms that we use in politics, so don't nobody be mad. Then people would say, well, his conduct doesn't line up with any religion. Doesn't matter. He claims to be Christian. That is not your place to tell somebody. Who are you to tell somebody who they are or not, right? Okay, we're going to transition a little bit into the identity politics and this concept of what identity politics is. Now, I know when I wrote this out, I kind of wrote it out to be a term that was probably, you were like, all these big words, don't worry about it. I'm going to read them out, then I'll explain it. A normative critique of pluralism focuses on downgrading the public and general interest. A lot of times of identity politics, and this is what people will say, and I'm going to use it for me, okay? Professor Callahan's Black. So he automatically supports Obama because Obama's Black. So therefore, I'm voting for Obama because we're both Black. It's identity. I connect. Pete Buttigieg, if a student is LGBTQ, he's voting for, or she's voting for Pete Buttigieg because they're LGBTQ. It works. White man, white student votes for Donald Trump. Well, I'm voting for him even because, you know, I understand him. He's a lot like me. And we all argue that. We all are, identity politics does play a part in a lot of the things we do. Okay, and identity just doesn't stop at race or gender or sexual orientation. It can be based on class. I identify with this person because we come from the same place. Now, we might not be the same race, but we come from the same place. This is a phenomenon, is enhanced by the growing importance of identity politics in the West. I would argue, and that I tend to disagree with kind of the book on this. I think America, especially in the United States, we've always had identity politics. I mean, prior to Obama and even after Obama, U.S. presidents all fit one right? So they all were white males. Is that not an identity? So, and we tended to believe that only white men can be president because, for whatever reason, we argue women can't because she might PMS. That's what somebody told me once when when Hillary Clinton was running in 2016. Well, professor, why would, you know, he was young, he didn't know, but he was like, but voting for her, what if she PMSs? First of all, Hillary Clinton at the time of the 2016 election was in her 60s, mid 60s, and that should have already passed. She should have already gone through that. So I don't think worrying about her menstrual cycle would have been a problem, but we use identity to justify our beliefs. Some people argue that it's a form of elitism, focusing on a degree which elites ought to rule. And we do tend to do that. Again, we tend to think certain people should be president. Oh, well, you know, he looks smart, he's articulate, you know, no, or they're a good businessman. Well, I tend to argue against the idea of a businessman being president because the US government is not a business. Just understand, there's a difference between government and business. Business is not in the business of, funny, little play on words. Business is not in the business of making a profit, just so you know. That's not what government does. I'm sorry, business is in the business of making profit. Government is not in the business of making profit. So be aware of that. So when people say, I want a businessman because then we can turn it and get a profit, you're not getting a profit, it's government. Government doesn't make profit. Government's not in the business of profits. That's why they tax you. And when you don't use things, when government gives you money and you don't use it, they take it back. And next year, and if it's a recurring thing, if you haven't spent all that money next year, they're gonna cut your funding and give you that much less. So it's important that you understand government is not in the business of making a profit. So let's not use that as an excuse. When we talk about identity politics, let's see. I'm sorry, the main approaches to political analysis. So we're going to segue again. We're going to talk about political analysis and what political analysis, what it is to analyze. And so be aware, because like I said, in this course, we're going to spend a lot of time analyzing, and I'm going to challenge you to understand, just to understand better, to have an idea. To better understand the empirical or the normative or semantic. When we talk about semantic, it's about linguistics, about language, how we speak, how the verbal rhetoric. When we talk about these things, we're not talking about, they're not mutually exclusive. Theorizing normatively about politics remains challenging and often contentious. Understand, there's no normal in politics. You know, if you might think it's normal, you might argue one thing is one way. And then you want to push your belief off because this is normal. It's normal to you, but it's not normal to everybody, right? You know, it's almost like belief when we argue a lot of times about this is not how God would see something. Where people tend to go wrong, and religious people, and as a religious person, I can say this as a person who who was raised religiously, who believes in a higher power, I can say this, but what we have to understand is everybody doesn't believe like we believe. So therefore, if you start an argument from your place of religion, it's that works for you. It might not work for the next person who doesn't believe it, right? Empirical analysis presupposes some normative assumptions. So sometimes when we analyze things and there's data to back it up, it will argue, and you can say, well, one time I had a student, not a student, I was on social media, and so we were talking about abortion and stuff, and the person asked me what my belief was on abortion. And I said, well, really, I don't have a position on it because I think that's personal to each individual. And so as a man, as a male, I think it's something I need to talk to my partner. I need to talk to her about. And if it's a deal breaker, then if she believes in abortion and I don't, then that's a deal breaker. I should not be in a relationship. So the person got offended, and they were like, well, you don't understand. Most abortions are done by Black women. And I was like, okay. So I pulled up the data, and he was like, yeah, like 36% of abortions are done by Black women. Well, he was right. But when I pulled up the data on white women, it was 35% of abortions are done. So I asked him, I said, so you're upset with me, you're attacking me, and you're using Black people as your fallback to make a point. Well, isn't a life a life? So it doesn't matter if it's a Black life or white life, it's a human life. So my point to the person was, so you're telling me you were trying to make me feel bad or look bad because 36% of Black people, Black women get abortions. Well, 35% of white women. Within the margin of error, they're still human beings. So if you're arguing human life, just argue human life, because I'm a human, and telling me something is Black will not make me pull me to your side more or not. If you're saying something that's trying to, I see the fetus as a life, as a baby, just say that, but you don't have to, and so the person, we end up not finishing the conversation because they were a little offended. But when we argue analysis, empirical analysis, and like the person did, they argued Black women were a majority of the people that were having abortion that year, and I believe it was like 2022 or 21, and it was 36% that year, the year before, but white women were 35%. And then Hispanics women were like down to 21, 18, 21, and Asian women were even less than that. Most abortions were Black, and over 50% of the abortion rate, 60% of the abortion rate were Black and white women. So that's where that's the issue that we need to find out why. But I'm arguing we don't need to break it up into the color of people's skin, because it's an American issue, right? So if you're against abortion, and I'm not saying I'm for or against, you should be looking at the whole of it, and not arguing to get me on your side because of Black people, and they were 36%. Well, white women were 35. So what does that mean? Their lives, their human lives, and it doesn't matter if if you're arguing their life, it's a human life. If that's your argument. Now, from the scientific standpoint, and I know this is going to be hard for some people to hear, from scientific standpoint, they argue a fetus isn't. And so therefore, if you're pro-life, then if you're pro-choice, and I don't like saying pro-life and pro-choice, I just think it's because I don't think anybody who's pro-choice is anti-life. I think it's what people want to carry babies full term, and then those who don't, those who, for whatever reason, and we don't know people's medical reasons, especially when it's the life of a mother, and that's a whole nother argument. But there's empirical analysis out there about that. And I know some people who are watching this lecture right now, I know you're probably thinking, why is he touching on this subject? Because this is politics. And in politics, we're going to talk about subjects that are not easy to talk about in the next couple of weeks, because this course, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about other topics that might not make you want to talk about it, but we also will have discussions on it, and this will be done through the course in an online environment. Okay, so when we talk about uh, analysis, the research and the studies, it tends to either be inductive, which will shine a light on the behavior, or deductive, which is more shining light on the theory, like why is this? Let's look at it from a theory standpoint as opposed to the behavior, which is inductive, which is deductive starts from the top. So we find a theory, we work our way down from that theory. Inductive is we look at the behavior, work our way up, and then we'll discover the theory. Sorry about that. Okay, so we're going to transition now to international relations. When we talk about international relations, many realists tend to look at international relations from the interactions of nation states, okay? So when we say states in political science, politics, and we're talking about states. The United States is a nation state. So when we say the states, we're not talking about California and Georgia and Mississippi and Texas and New York and Pennsylvania. We're talking about nation states, the United States, Georgia, the country, not Georgia, not the state in the southeast of the United States. We're talking about Poland and Nigeria and South Korea. Those are states, those are nation states, okay? And so when we look at that, we're looking at that from a wider range of actors, also non-governmental institutions and like charities, the Red Cross or the Red Crescent, if you're in Muslim countries, multinational corporations. Some corporations expand beyond borders. Car companies, Toyota, General Motors, they're multinational corporations. They sell their products in multiple nation states. Transnational bodies like the United Nations, NATO, BRICS, which is BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They formed a cooperation a group of nations that cooperate. The Arab League, which the African nations also have their own little kind of like NATO, where they work together to bring about peace within the African continent. So you will see these. You'll see this in international relations where we're talking about peace, and where sometimes it reflects on disagreement between those who take wide and narrow views on subject matter of politics. When we talk about politics, we're talking about globalization. We're looking at it from the macro of, and not from a micro standpoint. We're looking at it from the whole totality of all of it, and why it is what it is. And sometimes you will you can't talk about Middle Eastern politics without talking about the United States. You just can't. The United States has been involved in Middle Eastern politics since after the Second World War, the creation of the State of Israel. You cannot talk about Middle Eastern politics without talking about the United States' involvement in the Middle East. And also the Soviet Union, for the time the Soviet Union was in creation. But China's now more involved in the Middle East and in Africa. So you're starting to see the world is smaller. The study of politics can be traced back to Plato, Aristotle, Socrates. Politics only became so before I get to the second box, Plato, his teacher Socrates, Aristotle, Aristotle was a student of Plato, Plato was a student of Socrates. And so it goes back to the ancient Greek, the Greek idea of politics. And again, that's where does democracy come from? Ancient Greeks. Politics only became independent academic discipline in the early 20th century. So this is where political science comes from. This is where this course comes from. For much of the 20th century, the study of politics was dominated by positivism, the view that politics can be studied through the methods of natural science. Then in the 60s, it was more normative analysis had been revived, and that is political scientists have increasingly recognized the study of politics involves values as well as facts. So understand something as a political scientist. That's why sometimes when I'm talking, I'll use empirical and I'll use facts, but sometimes you've got to look at the values too, because values play a major part in why we do what we do. And so be aware of that, understand that. Okay, there are many different approaches to politics. Empirical analysis, concerned about what is, not what could be. Okay, and deductive analysis is an approach in which the investigator embarks on research with certain assumptions, which are tested against evidence. So again, deductive, inductive, deductive, okay? Inductive analysis approach in which theories are built up based on evidence, okay? So we start from the inductive, we start from the bottom, work our way up. Deductive, we start from the top, work our way down, okay? Can politics be science? Not if we take the familiar view that science is concerned with objective research into the natural phenomena, because human beings are unpredictable. Researchers cannot observe human behavior with complete detachment. Recent work on natural sciences methodologies have argued convincingly that even researchers in this field have human frailties and cannot be regarded as wholly objective. We're human beings, we're not objective beings. We're not. None of us are objective. But can politics be science? Yes, because as a political scientist myself, I do study the evidence. I do take into account what the evidence says, but I also watch people's behaviors, which you kind of look at it from a sociological standpoint. Watch people's behaviors. Behaviors matter, especially when it comes to politics. And so as we go on this journey, we will look at different ideologies. We'll look at justice. What is justice? What is political power and authority? Traditional ideologies. So we're going to look at it, and we're going to take more of a worldwide view as opposed to an American nationalistic. Okay, so I just want to thank you all for this first lecture of this course, and have a great day. And don't forget to sign in saying that you did watch the video, and have a great day. Thank you very much.